The alarm changed everything. Venri had worked at the Galactic Monitoring Station for 16 years. She had seen asteroids drift through shipping lanes. She had tracked pirate vessels trying to hide in nebula clouds. She had watched cargo ships break apart from engine failures. But she had never heard this particular alarm before. It was the deep space alarm, the one that meant something was coming from outside known territory, the one that meant something new had entered the galaxy. She turned to her console and felt her 3 hearts begin to beat faster. The sensor data made no sense. There was a ship out there in the empty void between stars. A big ship. A very big ship. "Station Commander," she called out. "You need to see this." Commander Yedel walked over with the slow confidence of someone who had seen everything. He was old for their species, with gray patches spreading across his blue skin. He looked at the screen and his confidence disappeared instantly. "That cannot be correct," he said. "Run the sensors again." Venri ran them again. Then a third time. The results stayed the same. The ship was 12 kilometers long. It bristled with weapon systems that the computer could not identify. Its power output exceeded anything in the hegemony database. It was coming from the direction of the quarantine zone, moving at speeds that should have been impossible. "Send this to High Command immediately," Yedel ordered. His voice was shaking. "Priority 1. Emergency classification." Venri transmitted the data and watched the ship continue its approach. She pulled up the star charts and traced its origin point. Her blood went cold. "Commander," she said quietly. "It came from Sol System." Yedel closed his eyes. The humans, everyone in the monitoring station stopped working. The word spread through the room like poison. Humans. The species that had been locked away 300 years ago. The species that was supposed to die out from isolation. The species that had apparently been very busy during their imprisonment. "That is impossible," said Technician Briel from across the room. "The humans were primitive. They had barely reached their own moon when we found them. That was 3 centuries ago." Venri replied. She magnified the sensor image and felt sick. The ship was covered in weapon batteries, rows upon rows of them. More weapons than some hegemony fleets carried combined. "They have had 3 centuries to improve." The communications panel lit up. High Command was responding to their transmission. Within minutes, the highest leaders of the hegemony of 12 would know that their forgotten prisoners had built something terrible. Venri wondered if 3 centuries was enough time to prepare for what was coming. The council chamber of the hegemony of 12 had not seen this much fear since the border wars. 200 years ago, representatives from all 12 member species filled the curved seats that rose around the central speaking platform. They shouted at each other. They demanded explanations. They accused each other of failures. Supreme Coordinator Elithra stood at the center and waited for silence. She was tall and thin, with silver scales that caught the light. She had led the hegemony for 40 years through peace and prosperity. Now she faced something that made all her experience feel worthless. "The vessel has been confirmed," she announced when the room finally quieted. "It emerged from the Sol Quarantine Zone 18 standard hours ago. It is heading directly toward hegemony space." "What do they want?" demanded Representative Korth of the Velian species. He was large and covered in thick fur, built for the cold world where his people evolved. "Have they communicated?" "The ship has not responded to any hails. It broadcasts nothing. It simply moves toward us in complete silence." This created more shouting. Silence was somehow worse than threats. Threats could be negotiated. Silence meant the decision had already been made. "Show us the sensor data," called Representative Meal of the Fenwary. She was small and delicate, with wings folded against her back. Her species was known for careful analysis. "Let us see what we are dealing with." Elithra activated the central display. A holographic image of the human ship appeared above the platform. The room went quiet again, but this time the silence came from shock. The ship was massive. It dwarfed everything the hegemony had ever built. Its hull was dark gray, almost black, and it was shaped like a blade. A blade designed to cut through anything in its path. Weapon systems covered every surface. The display highlighted them in red, and there was so much red that the ship looked like it was bleeding. "Impossible," whispered someone in the upper seats. "The analysis is complete," Elithra continued. She kept her voice steady even though her hearts were racing. The ship carries approximately 400 primary weapon batteries. Each one exceeds the firepower of our largest battlecruisers. The armor plating is made from materials we cannot identify. The power core outputs more energy than our home world uses in a year. Representative Bryn of the Turali raised his hand. His species was known for mathematics and logic. What is the ship's name? Did the sensors translate it? Elithra paused. This was the part she had dreaded. Yes, she said. The name is written on the hull in human script. It translates to one word. Conquest. The room erupted into chaos. Admiral Kethros received his orders. While sitting in his quarters aboard the flagship Eternal Vigilance, he read them 3 times to make sure he understood correctly. Then he poured himself a drink and sat in the darkness for a long time. He was being ordered to assemble the combined fleet. Every warship from all 12 hegemony species. Every carrier, every destroyer, every patrol craft that could be spared. He was to take this armada to the border of civilized space and intercept the human vessel. 600 ships against 1. The odds should have made him confident. Instead, he felt like he was being sent to his execution. Kethros had studied military history his entire life. He knew about the first contact with humanity 3 centuries ago. Most people remembered it as a simple border incident. Aggressive primitives had attacked hegemony ships and been punished for it. The humans were quarantined for the safety of civilized species. But Kethros knew the real story. The humans had not attacked first. They had been ordered to surrender their sovereignty and join the hegemony as a subordinate species. When they refused, a punitive fleet had been sent to force compliance. The humans had fought back with ships held together by primitive welds and prayers. They had weapons that were centuries behind hegemony technology. They had no shields, no faster-than-light communication, no experience with space warfare. They had destroyed 3 hegemony warships before being overwhelmed. 3 ships. Against primitives. It had been an embarrassment that the hegemony had worked hard to forget. The decision to quarantine humanity instead of exterminating them had been presented as mercy. Kethros suspected it had actually been fear. The Council had looked at those burning warships and decided that maybe, just maybe, it was safer to leave the humans alone. And now those humans had built a ship called Conquest. Kethros pulled up the sensor data again. He studied the weapon placements, the armor configuration, the engine outputs. Everything about the ship spoke of one purpose. This was not a vessel designed for exploration or trade or diplomacy. This was a weapon built by a species that had been given 300 years to nurse their anger and plan their revenge. He opened a communication channel to his fleet commanders. Begin assembly immediately, he ordered. All ships to rendezvous at coordinates 774. We intercept the human vessel in 6 days. He ended the transmission and looked at the image of the Conquest floating above his desk. What are you planning? He asked the silent ship. What do you want? The ship offered no answers. It just kept coming, moving through the darkness between stars with terrible purpose. On the hegemony homeworld, panic was spreading. News of the human ship had leaked despite efforts to keep it classified. Citizens crowded around public displays showing the sensor images. They watched the massive vessel moving closer and closer to their space. They saw the weapon batteries and the dark armor and the name written on the hull, Conquest. Some people tried to flee. Transport ships leaving the major cities were packed beyond capacity. Others gathered in temples and prayed to gods that suddenly seemed very small compared to the thing approaching from the darkness. Some simply sat in their homes and waited for the end. At the monitoring station, Vinri worked through her 3rd consecutive shift. She had not slept since the alarm first sounded. She could not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that ship. Any change? Commander Yettel asked. He looked even older than he had 2 days ago. No change, Vinri replied. Same course, same speed, still no communications. The fleet will reach the intercept point tomorrow. Vinri nodded. She had seen the fleet numbers. 600 ships. It sounded like an overwhelming force. But she had also studied the analysis of the human vessel. She had run the combat simulations herself, even though no one had asked her to. In every simulation, the hegemony fleet lasted less than 15 minutes. "Do you think we have a chance?" she asked quietly. Yetel did not answer for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "I think we are about to learn why our ancestors chose to lock the humans away, instead of destroying them. I think we are about to learn." 300 years ago, the stars had seemed full of promise. Captain James Chen stood on the bridge of the United Earth vessel Horizon and watched an alien ship approach for the first time in human history. His crew was silent. Some were crying, others were praying. All of them understood that everything was about to change. The alien ship was beautiful. It curved and flowed like something grown rather than built. Lights pulsed along its hull in patterns that suggested communication, though no one on the horizon could understand the language yet. "This is it," Chen said to his crew. "First contact, everything we have ever dreamed about, everything we have worked toward. Today, humanity joins the galactic community." He was wrong. He just did not know it yet. The first meeting took place on a space station at the edge of the Sol system. Human diplomats arrived in their best suits, carrying gifts and documents prepared by every nation on Earth. They had rehearsed speeches about peace and cooperation. They had brought samples of human art and music. They had come ready to make friends. The hegemony delegation arrived with armed guards and legal documents. Ambassador Liu Wei was the lead human negotiator. She had spent 30 years preparing for this moment. She had learned everything humanity knew about communication and diplomacy. She had practiced staying calm under pressure. None of it prepared her for what happened next. "These are the terms of your submission," the hegemony representative announced. He was tall and covered in blue scales, and he spoke with the confidence of someone who had done this many times before. "Your species will become a subordinate member of the hegemony of 12. You will accept our laws, our leadership, and our guidance. In exchange, we will share technology and allow you limited access to galactic trade routes." Liu Wei kept her face neutral even as her heart sank. "Subordinate? What exactly does that mean?" "It means you will do as you are told. Your species is young and primitive. You cannot be trusted to make decisions that affect the wider galaxy. You will accept oversight from elder species until you prove yourselves worthy of greater responsibility." "And how long would that take?" The hegemony representative made a gesture that might have been amusement. "The Velian species was elevated to full membership after 800 years of service. The Terali took 1200. You may expect a similar timeline." Liu Wei looked at her fellow diplomats. She saw the same shock on all their faces. 1,000 years of servitude. That was not partnership. That was slavery with better marketing. "I am afraid we cannot accept those terms," she said carefully. "Earth is a collection of independent nations. We answer to no one but ourselves. Perhaps we can discuss alternative arrangements that preserve our sovereignty, while still allowing cooperation." The hegemony representative stopped smiling. The punitive fleet arrived 6 months later. Humanity had used that time well. They knew war was coming. Every nation on Earth had contributed resources to build warships. They were crude things by galactic standards, welded metal plates and chemical rockets and weapons that seemed ancient compared to alien technology. But they were the best humanity could manage in 6 months. Captain Chen commanded the defense fleet. 47 ships against 300 hegemony vessels. He knew the odds. He knew his people would probably die. He went anyway. "All ships," he announced over the fleet channel. "This is not a fight we can win, but it is a fight we have to make. If we surrender, humanity becomes slaves. If we fight, we show them that we would rather die than kneel." The battle lasted for hours. Human ships exploded like fireworks against the darkness of space. Their weapons were too weak to penetrate hegemony shields. Their armor was too thin to stop hegemony weapons. They died by the dozens, burning and breaking, their crews scattered into the void. But they kept fighting. Chen watched his fleet crumble around him. He watched friends he had known for decades vanish in balls of fire. He watched humanity's hope turn to ash. And then something unexpected happened. A human missile, fired in desperation, found a gap in a hegemony ship's shields. The explosion tore through the alien vessel and broke it in half. One warship dead. The human fleet rallied. They changed tactics. They stopped trying to match the hegemony ship for ship. and started focusing on exploiting weaknesses. A second hegemony vessel fell, then a third. When the battle ended, only 12 human ships remained. But 3 hegemony warships had been destroyed, and 6 more were badly damaged. The hegemony fleet retreated, not because they had lost, but because winning had suddenly become more expensive than they wanted to pay. Chen died in that battle. His ship was among the first to fall, but his sacrifice bought humanity something precious. It bought them fear. The Hegemony Council met in emergency session to discuss the human problem. They destroyed 3 of our ships, Admiral Vether reported. He was the commander of the punitive fleet, and his scales had turned pale with shame. Their technology is primitive. Their tactics are basic, but they fought with a ferocity we have never encountered before. Then send more ships, Supreme Coordinator Melithra demanded. She was the predecessor of the current coordinator, just as ruthless but less patient. Overwhelm them. Crush them completely. We could, Vether agreed. We could send our entire navy. We would win eventually, but the cost would be significant. Those primitives learn quickly. Given time, they will become even more dangerous. Then we exterminate them, destroy their planet, end the threat permanently. The council chambers fell silent. Genocide was not unknown in galactic history, but it was considered distasteful. It raised uncomfortable questions. It set dangerous precedents. Representative Kithan of the Terali species spoke up. He was old even by his species' long-lived standards, and he remembered conflicts that others had only read about. I propose an alternative, he said. Containment. We establish a quarantine zone around the Sol system. No species may enter. No human may leave. We cut them off from all contact with the outside galaxy and let time solve our problem. Explain. Melithra ordered. Humanity is aggressive and resourceful, but they are also divided. Their planet is split into hundreds of competing nations. Without an external threat to unite them, they will turn on each other. Give them a century, perhaps 2, and they will destroy themselves. We simply need to wait. The council debated for 3 days. In the end, they chose containment. It was cheaper than war. It was cleaner than genocide. It allowed them to feel merciful while still eliminating the threat. The quarantine went into effect immediately. Sensor stations were placed around the Sol system's borders. Any ship attempting to leave would be destroyed. Any species attempting to enter would face severe penalties. Humanity was locked in a cage and left to die. But humanity did not die. The people of Earth watched the quarantine take effect. They saw the alien sensor stations appear at the edge of their solar system. They understood what had happened. They had been written off, abandoned, left to rot in isolation while the galaxy moved on without them. For a generation, there was despair. Nations fell into chaos. Wars erupted over dwindling resources. It seemed like the hegemony's prediction would come true. Humanity would tear itself apart. Then something changed. A new generation grew up. Children who had never known the hope of first contact. Children who had only known the cage. They looked at the sensor stations blinking at the edge of their system, and they felt something their parents had forgotten how to feel. They felt angry. Slowly, painfully, humanity began to unite. Old grudges were set aside. National borders became less important than species survival. Resources that had been hoarded were shared. Scientists who had competed began to collaborate, and they began to build. In the present day, historian Melville sat in the great library of the hegemony homeworld and studied the ancient records. He had been assigned to research humanity after the conquest appeared on sensors. The council wanted to understand what they were dealing with. What he found terrified him. We stopped monitoring them, he reported to the council. After the 1st century, the sensor stations were automated. After the 2nd century, the data stopped being analyzed. We assumed they were dead or dying. We never checked. What do the records show? Supreme Coordinator Elithra asked. Melville's hands trembled as he activated his presentation. Images appeared above the council platform. They showed the Sol system at different points over 3 centuries. In the earliest images, human ships were small and crude. Their stations were fragile bubbles of air and metal. But with each passing decade, the images changed. Ships grew larger. Stations grew stronger. Mining operations spread across the asteroid belt. Colonies appeared on distant moons. Industry expanded at a rate that defied belief. They did not destroy themselves, Melville said. They united. They built. They improved. They spent 300 years preparing for the day they would break free. The final image showed the conquest. 12 kilometers of death and anger given physical form. We gave them a reason to hate us, Melville continued. Then we gave them 3 centuries to act on that hate. We created this. We created them. Elitha stared at the image of the ship. Its name seemed to burn against the display. Conquest. What do they want? She asked. Melville shook his head. I believe they want exactly what the name suggests. I believe they have come to conquer us. And I believe we have no one to blame. Admiral Kethros stood on the bridge of the Eternal Vigilance and watched his fleet assemble. Ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in waves. Battlecruisers from the Velian homeworld. Carriers from the Tirali shipyards. Destroyers from 6 different species, all painted in the colors of their home nations, but flying under the unified banner of the hegemony. 600 warships, the largest fleet gathered into centuries. It should have been impressive. It should have made him feel confident. Instead, Kethros felt like a man arranging furniture in a house that was about to burn down. All ships reporting ready, Admiral, his executive officer announced. Commander Yashara was young and eager, still believing that problems could be solved with enough firepower. She had not yet learned that some problems were beyond solving. Show me the human vessel's position, Kethros ordered. The main display changed to show a tactical map. A blue dot represented the hegemony fleet. A red dot represented the conquest. The distance between them was shrinking steadily. Contact in 18 hours, Yashara reported. The human ship has not changed course or speed. It continues to ignore all communication attempts. Kethros studied the red dot, such a small symbol for something so dangerous. The tactical computers had run simulations of the coming battle. He had ordered them classified because the results would destroy morale completely. In the best-case scenario, the hegemony fleet lasted 12 minutes. In the worst case, it lasted 3. Admiral, Yashara said carefully. The crews are asking questions. They want to know the battle plan. The battle plan is simple. We place ourselves between the human vessel and hegemony space. We attempt to negotiate. If negotiation fails, we fight. And if fighting fails? Kethros did not answer. They both knew what would happen if fighting failed. The conquest would continue past the wreckage of the hegemony fleet and move on to the home worlds. One by one, the centers of galactic civilization would burn. Send a message to all ships, he ordered. Tell them to prepare for the most important battle in hegemony history. Tell them their courage will be remembered for 1,000 years. Yashara nodded and turned to her console. She did not ask the obvious question. Would anyone be alive to remember them if they lost? The fleet moved into position over the next several hours. Kethros arranged his ships in a defensive formation, with the heavy battlecruisers at the front and the faster destroyers on the flanks. The carriers hung back, ready to launch fighter craft at his command. It was a good formation. It would have worked against any normal enemy. The conquest was not a normal enemy. Reports began coming in from the outer picket ships. They had visual contact with the human vessel. What they described made Kethros' blood run cold. It is magnificent, one captain reported. His voice was shaking and terrible. I have never seen anything like it. The weapons alone. The weapons could crack a moon in half. Hold your position, Kethros ordered. Do not engage. Observe and report. But even as he gave the command, he saw the first cracks appearing in his fleet. A destroyer from the Fenari species broke formation. Its captain announced that he would not sacrifice his crew in a hopeless battle. Before Kethros could respond, 2 more ships followed. Then 5, then a dozen. Admiral, we have multiple vessels fleeing the formation, Yashara reported. Her voice was tight with anger and fear. The Fenari contingent is at half strength. The Brilliant cruisers are requesting permission to withdraw. Permission denied. Order all ships to hold position. They are not responding to orders. They are leaving. Kethros watched his fleet begin to crumble. 600 ships became 500. 500 became 400. Captains who had sworn oaths of loyalty decided that their oaths meant less than their lives. Species that had been partners for centuries chose survival over unity. In the end, 312 ships remained, just over half of the force he had assembled. It would have to be enough. Signal the remaining fleet, he said quietly. Thank them for their courage. Tell them we will face this enemy together. Meanwhile, aboard the Conquest, Captain Elena Vasquez watched the hegemony fleet through a wall of tactical displays. She sat in a command chair at the center of a bridge that hummed with quiet power. Around her, 200 crew members worked at stations that controlled enough firepower to reshape solar systems. Enemy fleet has stopped retreating, her tactical officer reported. They appear to be holding position at the border. Vasquez nodded. She was 53 years old, with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too much history. She was the fourth generation of her family to serve in the human military. Her great-grandfather had died in the first battle against the hegemony. Her grandfather had helped design the early weapons programs. Her mother had overseen the construction of the Conquest's engines. Now Elena would finish what her family had started. How many ships? She asked. Just over 300. They had 600, but half of them ran away when they saw us. Can you blame them? The tactical officer smiled grimly. No, Captain, I cannot. Vasquez stood and walked to the main viewport. The stars spread before her like diamonds on black velvet. Somewhere out there, beyond the sensor range, 12 species waited for judgment. They had locked humanity in a cage and expected them to die quietly. They had been very wrong. 3 centuries, she said softly. My family has been working toward this moment for 3 centuries. For generations of planning. For generations of building. For generations of hate. Shall I power up the weapon systems? The tactical officer asked. Vasquez did not answer immediately. She thought about her great-grandfather, burning alive in the wreckage of his primitive ship. She thought about her grandfather, spending his life in laboratories trying to create weapons that could fight back. She thought about her mother, working herself to death overseeing the construction of the Conquest. She thought about everything humanity had sacrificed to reach this point. Yes, she said finally. Power up everything. Let them see what they created. The hegemony fleet detected the power surge immediately. Sensor officers across 300 ships reported the same readings, with the same terrified voices. Admiral, the human vessel is activating its weapons. Kethros gripped the armrests of his command chair. This was it. The moment he had dreaded since the Conquest first appeared on sensors. All ships, battle stations, he commanded. Raise shields. Prepare to engage on my order. The fleet responded with professional efficiency. Whatever their fears, these were trained warriors. They would not die cowering. The Conquest's weapon systems came online one by one. Energy signatures spiked across every scanner in the fleet. The readings were almost impossible to believe. Each weapon battery on the human ship carried more firepower than a hegemony battlecruiser. And there were hundreds of them. Admiral, Yashara said. Her voice was barely a whisper. Their weapons are fully charged. If they fire, I know. Kethros looked at the tactical display. His 300 ships suddenly seemed very small, very fragile, very temporary. He opened a channel to the entire fleet. All crews, this is Admiral Kethros. The enemy before us is unlike anything we have faced. Their weapons are powerful. Their ship is massive. Many of you are afraid. That is natural. That is sensible. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Around him, thousands of beings waited to hear what he would say next. But we are the hegemony. We have maintained peace in this galaxy for 1,000 years. We have faced challenges before. We have survived. Whatever happens in the next few hours, know that your courage honors your species and your families. You are the shield that protects our civilization. Stand firm. Stand together. And whatever comes, face it with dignity. The channel closed. Kethros leaned back in his chair and waited for the end. But the end did not come. The Conquest continued its approach. Its weapons remained charged. Its course remained unchanged. But it did not fire. It simply kept coming, moving past the outer picket ships, ignoring them completely. The massive vessel passed within weapons range of a dozen destroyers, and did not acknowledge their existence. It was like watching a storm cloud pass over insects. Admiral, they are not attacking, Yashara reported. They are moving directly toward our main formation. Weapons status: still fully charged. They could fire at any moment. Kethros watched the red dot on his display move closer and closer. He did not understand. The humans had the power to destroy his fleet in minutes. Why were they waiting? What were they planning? The conquest stopped moving. It was directly in front of the hegemony fleet now. 12 kilometers of dark metal and glowing weapons. Close enough that some ships could see it through their viewports without magnification. It hung in space like a judgment waiting to be delivered. For 1 terrible hour, nothing happened. The two forces faced each other in silence. 300 hegemony ships, 1 human ship. The future of the galaxy balanced on a knife's edge. Then the communication panel lit up. "Admiral," the communications officer said, "the humans are hailing us." Kethros felt his heart racing. After days of silence, the humans finally wanted to talk. He did not know if this was good news. Captain Elena Vasquez looked at the alien admiral on her display screen. He was trying to appear brave, but she could see the fear in his eyes. She had seen that fear before. Every species in the galaxy showed fear in similar ways. Wide eyes, tense muscles, the desperate attempt to seem calm when everything inside was screaming. "Do you know why we named this ship Conquest?" she asked again. Admiral Kethros shook his head slowly. "I assumed it was obvious. You have come to conquer us." Vasquez let the silence stretch for a moment. Let them wonder. Let them fear. They had given humanity 300 years of silence. They could endure a few more seconds. 3 centuries ago, she began, "Your people found us. We were young. We were weak. We had barely left our own planet. We looked up at the stars and saw possibility. We saw friends waiting to be met. We saw a galaxy full of wonders to explore." She stood up from her command chair and walked closer to the camera. Let them see her face clearly. Let them see the generations of anger in her eyes. "And what did we find? We found you. A civilization that saw us as lesser beings. A civilization that demanded our submission. When we refused to kneel, you tried to break us. When breaking us proved too expensive, you locked us away. The quarantine was meant to protect both our peoples," Kethros said. His voice was weak. He knew the excuse was hollow. "The quarantine was meant to kill us slowly. You hoped we would destroy ourselves. You hoped we would fade away into history, a failed species that never mattered. You locked the door and threw away the key." Vasquez turned and gestured at the bridge around her. 200 humans worked at their stations, controlling a ship that could end civilizations. Instead, you gave us motivation. You gave us purpose. You gave us 300 years to plan and prepare and build. Every generation taught the next what you had done to us. Every child learned why we could never forget. Every scientist worked toward a single goal. She turned back to the camera, the ship. Admiral Kethros felt his remaining confidence crumble as the human captain spoke. Her words were calm and measured, but behind them lay depths of anger that he could barely comprehend. This was not the hot rage of a sudden offense. This was cold fury, carefully preserved across generations like a sacred flame. "The conquest was designed by our greatest engineers," Vasquez continued. "It took 60 years to build. 3 generations worked on it, knowing they would never see it completed. They died at their stations, passing their knowledge to the next generation, trusting that their children would finish what they started." The tactical display on Kethros' bridge showed the human ship in terrible detail, every weapon battery, every power conduit, every armor plate. It was not just a warship. It was a monument to 3 centuries of hatred. "We built this ship to conquer," Vasquez said. "That is the truth. We designed it to defeat your fleets, break your defenses, and bring your civilization to its knees. Every system aboard this vessel was created for one purpose, complete and total victory over the hegemony of 12. She paused, letting her words sink in. "Do you want to know what our weapons can do, Admiral?" Kethros did not want to know, but he could not look away. Primary batteries, plasma cannons capable of melting through planetary crusts. Secondary batteries, antimatter torpedoes that can crack moons in half. We have weapons that disrupt the bonds between atoms. We have weapons that tear holes in the fabric of space. We have weapons that your scientists have not even imagined yet. The display behind Vasquez lit up with targeting information. Lines appeared, connecting the Conquest's weapons to ships in the hegemony fleet. Every vessel was covered with multiple targeting locks. Right now, the ship has firing solutions on every vessel in your fleet. We could destroy all 300 of your ships in approximately 4 minutes. Our tactical computers have run the simulations. Your shields cannot stop our weapons. Your armor cannot withstand our power. Your speed cannot outrun our targeting systems. Commander Yashara whispered something behind Kethros. He did not hear her. He could not hear anything except the human captain's voice. You brought 600 ships to stop us. Half of them fled before we even arrived. The rest of you remained, either through courage or because you had nowhere else to go. It does not matter. The result would be the same. Vasquez walked back to her command chair and sat down. She steepled, her fingers in front of her face, looking every bit like a judge preparing to deliver a sentence. 1 ship against your entire civilization, Admiral, and we would win. Throughout the hegemony fleet, crews watched the transmission in stunned silence. On the bridge of the Eternal Vigilance, no one moved, no one spoke. The human captain's words had stripped away every illusion of hope. Kethros found his voice, though it came out rough and strained. Then why are you talking to us? If you can destroy us so easily, why not simply do it? It was the question everyone wanted answered. The question that had been burning since the Conquest first appeared on sensors. If the humans came for revenge, why wait? Why give the hegemony time to prepare, to assemble fleets, to pray for miracles? Vasquez smiled again. This time, the expression was harder to read. There was something behind her eyes that Kethros could not identify. That is an excellent question, Admiral. Let me tell you about my great-grandfather. She reached into her uniform pocket and pulled out a small object. It looked like a fragment of metal, blackened and twisted by heat. James Chen was his name. He commanded the 1st Defense Fleet against your punitive force 300 years ago. He knew he could not win. He knew he would die. He went anyway, because surrender was not in his nature. This piece of metal is from his ship. It was recovered from the wreckage by salvage teams years later. She held the fragment up to the camera. My family has passed this down for 3 centuries. Father to son, mother to daughter. A reminder of what your people did to us. A reminder of why we could never stop working toward revenge. Kethros stared at the twisted metal. Such a small thing to carry so much weight. My great-grandfather died believing that his sacrifice meant something. Vasquez continued. He believed that humanity would remember. He believed that we would find a way to fight back, someday, somehow. He was right. She put the fragment back in her pocket. I grew up hearing stories about him. About his courage. About his defiance. About the moment he ordered his fleet to attack even though he knew they had no chance. He became a legend among my people. A symbol of everything humans could be. Vasquez leaned forward in her chair. But here is the part of the story that most people forget, Admiral. My great-grandfather was not a killer. He was an explorer. Before your people arrived, he spent his life searching the stars for signs of life. He dreamed of meeting other species. He dreamed of friendship and cooperation and shared discovery. Her voice grew quieter, but somehow more intense. When your people attacked, he did not fight because he hated you. He fought because you gave him no other choice. He would have preferred peace. He would have preferred partnership. He would have preferred almost anything to dying in the darkness between stars. The words hung in the air between the 2 fleets. Kethros felt something shift inside him. He had expected threats. He had expected demands. He had not expected a history lesson. My family has carried his memory for 3 centuries, Vasquez said. We built this ship in his name. We trained our whole lives for this moment. We have the power to destroy you, Admiral. We have the ability to make you pay for everything you did to us. She stood up again, and this time her expression was different. The anger was still there, but it was mixed with something else, something that looked almost like sadness. The question is, what would my great-grandfather want us to do? Kethros did not answer. He could not answer. He was beginning to understand that this confrontation was not going where he had expected. He would want justice, Vasquez said. He would want acknowledgement of what your people did to us. He would want humanity to take its rightful place in the galaxy. as equals, not servants. She took a deep breath. But I do not think he would want revenge, not really. Not if revenge meant becoming the very thing we fought against. He did not die so that his descendants could become conquerors. He died so that we could be free. Silence stretched between the two fleets. 300 hegemony ships waited for their fate to be decided. One human ship held all the power. I have spent my whole life preparing for this moment, Vasquez said. Every day, I have imagined when it would feel like to finally face your people, to finally have the power to make you suffer the way we suffered, to finally take revenge for 3 centuries of isolation and hatred. She looked directly at the camera, directly at Kethros, directly at everyone watching throughout the hegemony fleet. And now that the moment is here, I find that I am tired of hate. Kethros felt his heart skip a beat. What was she saying? This ship was built to conquer. Vasquez repeated, that is the truth. We named it Conquest because that is what we plan to do. But having the power to conquer does not mean we must use it. Having the ability to destroy does not mean we are obligated to destroy. She sat back down in her command chair. Captain Elena Vasquez looked out at the hegemony fleet one final time. 300 ships, thousands of beings, all of them waiting for her to pronounce their fate. She thought about her family, her great-grandfather, who had died fighting impossible odds, her grandfather, who had spent his life in laboratories creating weapons, her mother, who had worked herself to death building this ship. They had all sacrificed everything for this moment. What would they want her to do? Here's my offer, she said. We are going to power down our weapons. The reaction was immediate. On her own bridge, officers turned to stare at her in disbelief. Across the void, she could see the shock on Admiral Kethros' face. Captain, her tactical officer said urgently, if we power down, we will be defenseless. They could destroy us. Vasquez nodded. Yes, they could. She looked at her crew, 200 faces staring back at her. These were people who had trained their entire lives for this mission. People who had expected to fight. People who had expected revenge. 300 years ago, your ancestors made a choice, she told them. They chose not to surrender, even though surrender would have been easier. They chose to fight, even though fighting meant death. They chose their principles over their survival. She stood up from her command chair. Today, we make a different choice. Not because we are weak, not because we are afraid, but because we are strong enough to choose something better than revenge. She turned back to the main display, where Admiral Kethros waited in confused silence. We have spent 3 centuries proving that humanity cannot be conquered. Now we will prove something else. We will prove that humanity does not need to conquer others. She gave the order. One by one, the Conquest's weapon systems began to power down. The massive cannons that could crack planets fell silent. The torpedoes that could destroy fleets went cold. The most powerful warship in galactic history made itself harmless. What are you doing? Kethros demanded. His voice was sharp with suspicion. This must be a trick. No trick, Admiral. No trap. No hidden weapons waiting to spring. We are showing you something that your people have never understood about humanity. And what is that? Vasquez smiled. It was not a cold smile this time. It was tired and sad and somehow peaceful. Strength is not just the ability to destroy. True strength is the ability to destroy and choosing not to. The news spread through the hegemony fleet like wildfire. The human ship was powering down. Its weapons were going offline. It was making itself vulnerable. No one knew what to make of it. Admiral, Commander Yashara said urgently, this is our chance. We could attack now, while their defenses are down. We could destroy them before they can reactivate their weapons. Kethros stared at the tactical display. She was right. The Conquest was defenseless. For the first time since it appeared, the hegemony had the advantage. They could end this threat right now. All they had to do was fire. But Kethros did not give the order. Instead, he watched the human ship float in space, dark and quiet, trusting its fate to enemies who had every reason to destroy it. Captain Vasquez, he said slowly, why are you doing this? Her answer came immediately. Because we have to break the cycle, Admiral. 3 centuries ago, your people treated us as lesser beings. You tried to force us into submission. When we resisted, you locked us away. You created enemies where you could have had friends. She gestured at her darkened bridge. We could do the same thing now. We could use our power to dominate you. We could force you into submission. We could become exactly what you were 300 years ago. But what would that accomplish? What would that prove? Kethros thought about her words. He thought about the history between their peoples. He thought about the fear that had driven the hegemony to quarantine humanity in the first place. What do you want? He asked finally. Equality, Vasquez said simply. Nothing more, nothing less. We want to join the galactic community as full members. We want our sovereignty recognized. We want our past acknowledged and our future respected. That is all. That is everything, Admiral. That is what we have been fighting for since the beginning. Not conquest, not revenge, just the right to exist as equals. The negotiations took 3 days. Admiral Kethros served as the hegemony's representative, speaking directly with Captain Vasquez across the void between their ships. It was a strange way to conduct diplomacy, but neither side was willing to let the other board their vessel. The terms that emerged were unlike anything in galactic history. Humanity would be accepted into the hegemony as a full member species, with equal rights and equal representation. The quarantine would be lifted immediately. Trade routes would be opened. Cultural exchange would begin. The past would be acknowledged. A formal apology would be issued for the original attack on Earth and the 3 centuries of isolation that followed. Monuments would be built to honor those who had died in the first battle, human and hegemony alike, and the conquest would remain. This was the one condition that Vasquez refused to negotiate. The ship would stay active, crewed, and watching. It would serve as a permanent reminder of what humanity was capable of, a reminder that their mercy was a choice, not a weakness. Think of it as insurance, Vasquez explained. We are choosing to trust you. We are choosing to believe that you have learned from the past. But if we are wrong, if you ever decide to treat us as lesser beings again, the conquest will still be there. Kethros accepted the terms. He had no other choice. But secretly, he was relieved. The humans were not asking for revenge. They were not demanding punishment. They wanted peace. Real peace, based on respect rather than fear. It was more than the hegemony deserved. The announcement of the treaty caused shockwaves throughout hegemony space. Some species welcomed it. They had always been uncomfortable with the quarantine and were glad to see it ended peacefully. Others were angry. They felt the hegemony was showing weakness by negotiating with humans instead of destroying them. But the majority simply felt relief. The great crisis was over. The galaxy would not burn. Life could continue. On the hegemony home world, Supreme Coordinator Elithra addressed the Council one final time. We made a terrible mistake 300 years ago, she said. We looked at humanity and saw only their weakness. We did not see their potential. We did not see their determination. We did not see the fire that burns in their souls. She gestured to a display showing the conquest floating peacefully in space. Its weapons were still offline. Its hull gleamed in the starlight. It was beautiful and terrible and impossible to ignore. They could have destroyed us. They had every right to try. Instead, they showed us mercy. They showed us a different path. They showed us that the cycle of violence and fear can be broken. She looked around the council chamber. We should learn from them. We should remember this moment, not because they were stronger than us, but because they were better than us. They chose peace when war would have been easier. They chose forgiveness when revenge would have been satisfying. The council voted unanimously to accept the treaty. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the observation deck of the Conquest and watched the stars. Behind her, the sounds of celebration echoed through the ship. Her crew was drinking and singing and crying. They had accomplished what generations before them had only dreamed about. She did not join them, not yet. She pulled out the fragment of metal from her pocket. The piece of her great-grandfather's ship. She had carried it with her since childhood. A constant reminder of where she came from and where she was going. We did it, she whispered. Not the way you expected. Not with fire and blood and vengeance. But we did it. She imagined she could hear her great-grandfather's voice. Imagined he was proud of her. Proud of what humanity had become. You taught us to fight, she continued. You taught us to never give up, no matter the odds. But you also taught us something else, even if you did not realize it. You taught us that the greatest victory is the one where nobody has to die. She looked at the fragment one last time. Then she carefully put it back in her pocket. "Rest now," she said softly. "Your descendants have found their place in the stars, and we got here by being better than our enemies, not worse." The stars continued to shine. The conquest floated in the darkness, a monument to 3 centuries of anger transformed into something greater. And somewhere in the vastness of space, humanity began a new chapter in its history. They had built a ship named Conquest. They had proven they could conquer anything, and then they had chosen not to. That was the most human thing of all. Years later, a young hegemony student would ask her teacher about the Great Crisis, about the ship that appeared from nowhere, about the humans who built a weapon capable of destroying civilizations. Why did they spare us? She would ask. They hated us. We hurt them. Why did they not take revenge? Her teacher would think for a long moment before answering. Because they understood something that took us 3 centuries to learn. He would say, the strongest thing in the universe is not a weapon. It is the ability to put that weapon down and walk away. The student would nod, not fully understanding. But someday she would. Someday they all would. And the conquest would remain, watching over the galaxy it had chosen not to destroy. A reminder that power without wisdom is dangerous, but power with mercy, aye.